career.
Well, there was
sure.
also a bunch of other Xbox news from the week. Phil spoke on a couple of podcasts. He spoke on Destin Legari's podcast and also Gamer Tag Radio. And looks like the publishing strategy is a changing, and they're committed to it. I mean, are we surprised at this point? No.
I mean, that's been like 2 years now. I've been saying this, right? It's like,
yeah.
That's a lie. Actually, it was at the very start of last year that it was like, this is clearly happening.
But then they didn't, because at DICE, everyone thought that's when they were gonna drop it with that weird business update. And I remember being sat at a Starbucks with a bunch of developers, media, PR. Like we were all just sit there watching the stream on our phones to see if they were gonna say anything, and then they didn't.
Yeah, it's still wishy-washy.
But now, like, he went out and said it, you know? Our strategy is to allow our games to be available.
I mean, I have nothing to say on that because I've essentially been saying that is the case for the last, over a year. And I was just saying, they have not been willing to say it, but it's true.
Yeah.
And so now he's finally saying what has been obvious forever. Yeah. So, I mean, it is what it is, you know? But I think he also did leave a little headroom. Like, he's like, oh, not everything will be multi-platform. There'll be some things that are Xbox exclusive. That's what he said. And it's kind of like, okay, right. I don't know. What are we talking about now? Like, which ones are they?
Like just Halo or just Gears of War? I don't know.
No, I don't think that will be. I think they're the perfect example of stuff that will go multi-platform.
Yeah, so I don't
know. Like, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, like, what is it that
catalog would be?
Like, what's the case to keep, I don't know, Flight Sim exclusive? Didn't that get announced for PlayStation? Has it been announced for PlayStation yet? I feel like it has.
No, I don't think so.
I don't think so either. I don't know. Like, it's just, I don't know what the case is to say again.
Forza?
I really don't know. I
do feel like at this point, like now that all the dust has settled, I guess, like, and they've acknowledged it. They've said it themselves. Like, they're behind in the whole console war thing. Like, we've known this for years now. So for them to pivot to being everywhere, like, all right, cool, whatever. I say that as somebody who, of course, plays on a bunch of platforms. My play has been fragmented. I haven't had like just gamer score or just trophies for years now. I've always just kind of. So I don't know. I guess if you're still just invested in the Xbox ecosystem, like, you hope hardware continues, and it seems like hardware is continuing. You know, for people who are fans of the boxes, so to speak. But I don't know. I'm kind of like, all right, whatever, cool. Like,
I think it was important because he addressed as well that one of the main concerns that people have is that if the Xbox goes away, what happens to libraries? What happens to purchases? And he did come out and say that they have been paying attention to that. You know, they've shown their commitment with things like backwards compatibility and play anywhere and everything. So it's like, as long as that's front of mind.
I mean, it's just like them staying, it's like carving out their own unique little path in the world of games, right? If their thing is just on every single thing. I mean, that's how it's going to go. Like, people like with attention span and people being confused by purchasing hardware anyway. That's always been a thing. Like, people go to the store, they're confused about a Wii U or a Wii, or can the PlayStation 4 play PlayStation 4, all that shit. Like, this cuts out all of that. And it's just, here's a video game. My dad scrolled past Civ 7 on Netflix the other day.
What?
And I saw it and I was like, that's on TV? And my dad was like, what's that? And I was like, you're not ready for that.
Don't worry about that, Dad.
But your kids are going to love it.
Nice, man. Nice.
Very good. Very good.
I mean, yeah, for me personally, like, I think in that interview with Destin, he's like, because Destin's like, why should we buy an Xbox? And he's like, well, and Phil's like, well, we want our hardware to be the differentiator and whatever. And it's like, but he didn't offer any kind of information on what that looks like, because the reality is that hardware is not a differentiator at this point. It's not a differentiator for like any vector, like, you know what I mean? Like, as in, look at mobile phones, like Samsung and Apple, they're both putting out very similar products, like, it's not like they have different things that they're doing. You look at like, computers, they're all built the same way. And obviously the hardware components are different between AMD and NVIDIA, but they're doing the same thing. Like, what is he imagining how is hardware going to be a differentiator for Microsoft? don't see what that actually means. His hardware can't be stronger because they're still bound by the same GPU and CPU that everybody else makes for them. They don't produce that shit themselves. So
feature-wise too, it would be like, the devs aren't going to take advantage of these proprietary features.
Totally. You might add like a fucking nunchuck to it, but no one's going to use that in a third-party world. That's not what this is. So I don't believe... I'm sure maybe Phil has some things he's thinking about. I don't know what those things are. I don't see how hardware can be a differentiator for him at this point. I don't really see this as Microsoft announcing that they are doing multi-platform. Because, as I said, I think they made that announcement a year ago. That's the way I took it anyway. I really see this as them actually announcing that hardware just doesn't matter to them anymore, which is the exact opposite of what Phil says. But that's what I believe, because they're banking on a future where you just buy your games anywhere.
But they still get a cut.
And they get a cut. So hardware doesn't matter to them, And they say, okay, you might have a really powerful Xbox console. Cool. Well, PlayStation will just make one that's just as powerful. Or you may say, well, we'll do a handheld. It's like, well, okay, well, Nintendo exists, and Sony can also just make a handheld, and you're also competing with the Steam Deck. And so, what's the business model here? Like, unless it's being the exclusives are the linchpin that makes the hardware business work. And so if you abandon exclusives, you're actually abandoning hardware. That's what that actually is.
Well said.
And so, he may say Xbox's hardware is a differentiator. Totally disagree. Call of Duty is Microsoft's differentiator. Like Game Pass is their differentiator. Azure Cloud is their differentiator.
They're putting WoW on Game Pass?
I heard that as well. Those are the differentiators. And for Phil to say otherwise, I don't know where he's coming from with that. I don't think that's true. So yeah, because Sony can't put out World of Warcraft and they can't put out Call of Duty, and the amount of IP that Xbox now has under its banner is massive. Just look at this most recent Direct. There's like 4 games, 3 of them are coming out in the next 3 months, and they all look like great games. And that's just the next few months. Think about how much bigger it's going to get when all these studios get rolling. And I don't know, man. That's going to be tough for Sony to compete with that, I think. In their... What do I mean? I don't think they're really competing with each other at this point. So Microsoft is just running its own multi-platform race. Sony is still trying to make sure that they can sell boxes. And I personally believe in the value of the box. I really do. I think there's something in that.
And Nintendo is just...
Well, that's it. We don't even talk about Nintendo in this conversation.
Nintendo's in a corner
doing
just
this Nintendo
dancing
thing
to its own little tune.
But that's like the whole thing with this, right? Like, we talk so much about Sony and Xbox, but like Nintendo crushed all of them this past generation on this little calculator hardware, and that's
a graphing calculator. Let's,
And I think that's the ultimate point, right? If you make a decent piece of hardware that plays exceptional games, that is how you win. And that is why Xbox has lost this last 2 generations, because they just didn't have those exceptional games. That's why Sony has done very well for itself, because it did have those games. And if Xbox can have exceptional games that are available on all platforms, they'll do really well as a multi-platform publisher, and they'll make lots of money. But they're not going to sell Xbox hardware because I can play it on other platforms, So, yeah.
Yeah.